Hi, it's Warren Whitlock here. I'm talking to my friend who I've never met, Tim Fargo. Hello, Tim.
Hey Warren, how are you today?
All right, so I'm doing now what's in the vogue. We are setting up. I set up a hangout and turned on the recorder, and we're talking. So let's just keep on talking because some of you may have seen that this is on YouTube, but this is our radio show, and so coming to you live and direct and via recording. Uh, and the interwebs. So we're going to talk to probably the best friend I have who I've never met before. And I know very little about him other than Alphabet Success on Twitter, and we talk every day. And such a great personality and great spirit about him that I knew this was somebody that you'd want to meet, and so I'm going to meet him with you. Hi. so so tell us
That's too much of a buildup. I think we should leave it there, Warren.
yeah, so tell us, yeah, you're a heck of a guy. You're a heck of a guy who I don't know at all, and frankly didn't recognize when you popped up on my screen this morning. So well, let's not talk about the haircut. Let's talk about you and first of all, just a little bit so that my listeners know where did you come from, where are you now, and you know the life story in 3 sentences.
Oh,
You can
wow.
use 6 if you have to.
I'll try to go as fast as I can. Born in Lackawanna, New York. Adopted when I was 3 months old. Grew up in Akron, Ohio. Moved to Miami when I was 18. Went to university down there. Florida Atlantic. It's a Florida State school. I've lived all over the U.S. and lots of Europe, and I actually have a place in Africa. But at the moment, I'm in Poland.
Okay,
So
so
that was probably more than 6 sentences, but
that was no, that was perfect. So that begs a question to me, you know, because obviously you've been all over Earth, and you're not living in Las Vegas. There must be something wrong with you. Um, so
a number of things, I'm sure.
what's the draw? Why do you like living in Poland now?
It's where the missus is from.
Okay.
So this is home for her, and we spend part of the time in the States, and we spend part of the time here.
So actually, it could be worse. She could be from Minnesota.
Yeah, exactly.
And thank you. Yeah, one listener from Minnesota. I'm sorry, I had to pick some place.
Yeah, there went that demographic.
I can. Well, I'm on record for not liking Florida, so we'll pick on Florida today, since
Oh, well, you're
that way
among many.
we can get school rivalries in East Coast, West Coast, and humid versus the desert. I can get all my favorite memes to argue about, um, and go team on the sports.
Yeah,
I think
absolutely.
I live in the one major city in the United States that doesn't have a sports franchise to cheer for. Um,
Yeah, but don't you have UNLV?
we
Didn't
do
you
have
have like a big?
UNLV. Yeah, you can get pretty worked up about UNLV. So
Yeah, but didn't you guys used to have a really big basketball team? I don't
yeah,
follow that stuff, so I don't really
right,
know.
yeah, UNLV Rebels, go Rebels.
Yeah,
Yeah,
the
and
guy with the towel used to work. He was there.
something like that. Yeah, but
Yeah, the guy that chewed on the towel. You remember
most
him?
most of the time, yeah, that's not really how I would describe him, but that does make sense. I know who you're talking about. So, yeah, usually we're known as the place where you can come and bet on any of your teams, and we'll say, yeah, go team, whichever one you want to bet on. And so, and
Yeah.
I have to always put in my plug, come on out and visit. There's plenty of empty houses still, and there's lots of rooms, and you know those buildings are all paid for, so you know, come gamble, have fun. So let me check. Yep. Still don't have a state income tax bill after 9 years. I'm doing really well.
Excellent.
So So how much traveling do you do now?
Quite a bit actually. I mean, I just came back from the U.S. a few weeks ago, and I went on a road trip through the Czech Republic, Slovakia, Hungary, Romania, and back with my son. And then I'm going back to the Czech Republic in a month, and then I'm going to Japan and Southeast Asia for a month.
Now you talk about that like you know you're just out to stop by the dry cleaners and grocery store, and no big deal to travel around. I'm sure some of my listeners are going to be impressed by the fact that this guy's a world traveler. That's fun. Is that a good lifestyle? Are you doing? Are you required to? What motivates you to go to all these places?
Just curiosity, I suppose, more than anything. I mean, I just really like seeing new things. I mean, you know, we're going to Japan beginning of October, and they have a really unique kind of aesthetic, and I've never seen it. I actually did a software project right when I got out of college to do software for a company that exported citrus to Japan. And one of the things I found out in doing that project is the Japanese love things that are like, if they want citrus, they want it to be perfectly spherical. So very spherical grapefruit and oranges are extremely popular and not particularly cheap. But it's fascinating to go to a place like that because, you know, it's not something that, you know, perhaps you or I would think about. So yeah. I think that aspect of it's pretty fun.
Yeah, that fits in what I know about the Japanese culture, and that's fascinating. Sheesh, I think we could talk more. We could talk all day about several of these subjects. In the back of my mind, I have this past saying, like, if I'm a listener, hi listeners, and I'm trying to you know, figure out what's their, how do we make their lives better. And one of the things that I think is a message that I keep getting from talking to you is that regardless of where you are or what you're doing, you can get anything you want out of life by helping other people get what they want. And when practiced best, there's no ulterior motive. You're a real friendly guy on Twitter. Are you trying to get me to buy something?
No, actually, I'm not. No, I mean, I think, you know, as you said, a lot of it comes down to, I mean, it's nice to have a presence, and then occasionally I'm plugging other people's stuff. I do have my own book. I plug that occasionally. But in general, I mean, there's an opportunity. I just had someone contact me that has a brand, and they're having some difficulty with it, and so I don't know how much help I'm going to give them. And I'm not charging for it. It's just something, we'll see what happens. But I'm going to give them a hand, and I've got some ideas, and we'll see what happens. But, you know, I enjoy that kind of stuff. And, I mean, I knocked around for a few years just traveling after I sold my business. And, you know, it sounds really exotic and fun, but, you know, being engaged is pretty important. And it's been really nice being on Twitter. And when I met you, that was really fun because we were kind of going back and forth. And actually, we kind of continue to do that. So, you know, I just enjoy it, and it's also nice. I think one of the things that people don't appreciate about Twitter is that it's, you know, it, like a lot of people think it's just cat photos or, you know, photos of people's lunch or something. And there's a really international opportunity to meet people of a similar ilk, whatever narrow niche you might define that as, and, you know, and share some commonalities across borders. And I think it's a really, really amazing place that's probably not completely well understood by a lot of people who maybe show up for the first time, and because it's so robust by its very nature, it's a little bit complex to figure out if you haven't ever been there before. So I think for the uninitiated, they might find it a little daunting, but once you get your head around it, it's an awesome thing.
Sure. Well, you know, I felt that way when I first saw the idea of texting on a phone. If there's any technology that I saw coming that I didn't think is something that made any sense at all, it's got to be SMS text. I remember reading about it. It was coming. It was going to be added as a availability. I had a cell phone for many years before that, and it's got to be like early '90s. And I'm thinking like the idea of sending out a few characters in a text along with a phone call or instead of a phone call. No, why would anybody want to do that? And fast forward, the U.S., as I'm sure you know, is behind the most of the world on using text to communicate. And I would I remember going to events and asking people about them texting. And if there were Europeans, they said, I text to 500 different people. And you talk to U.S. persons as well. I use text. I've sent 5 texts last month. And about that time, Twitter came along, which is just based on being able to send text to groups of people and things like that. I think when they started out, they didn't envision that most of it would be public and used by brands and promoting movies and talking to Charlie Sheen and other celebrities like you. Did you see that? I just put you in a sentence with Charlie Sheen.
Yeah.
Winning. And so by the time I wrote a book on it, it was like, okay, it was a gimmick. My idea of writing a book on Twitter was to be the first book out on Twitter, and we did that in 2008, and so the book became a bestseller. I'm talking to people all the time, and they kept asking, like, so how much time does it take, and how much money are you making? And, I think still today that's something that people are very concerned about if they're not using Twitter. And I don't know, how else could we have met and been friends if we didn't have Twitter? So
it would have been infinitely more difficult because you just don't have that level of interaction. It's almost like the old. You've been around PCs for a long time?
Yeah.
You remember the old bulletin boards?
Right. Oh, that's how I got started. I went online in 1981 to do bulletin boards.
Okay, so
way back, a whole lifetime ago, as any of my kids would say.
Yeah. But it's almost like it's sort of a fenceless bulletin board,
right?
And so there's like this huge level of interaction, and people that potentially have an interest in each other can find one another. And yeah, I don't see.
I go back. Yeah, I just thought of this. I go back since before the internet. I know I don't look that. I dye my hair gray. We used bulletin boards to communicate before there was any internet.
Right.
And it just made perfect sense for me when I could connect to more people and reach anybody anywhere in the world that I wanted to do it that way. The bulletin boards were limited to who would dial up that particular modem at first. CompuServe wasn't. And, but I'm trying to think back of it, say my college days were in the 70s. You'd post something on the bulletin board, gave a guy a ride from, through several states, 800 miles, and never met him before the day that he showed up and got into my car. It's a lot like the services doing those kind of things today. Just yesterday, I interviewed a guy working on an Uber for planes, and he said 1/3 of the private aircraft travel between the jets traveling between airports are empty, dark legs to make the plane available for the next place it needs to go. And so the cost can come way down when you can have something that books efficiently. So somebody just shows up, gets on the plane, and $1 is more than they would make if they flew the plane empty from place to place. And so a lot of the technologies we use today is just things people want. And I suppose, you and I could communicate by letter, but first of all, I wouldn't have known you existed if it was by letter. I wouldn't have bought your book, and we certainly wouldn't be talking every day.
Yeah. Well, and it's nice, because you can. It doesn't have to be like when you were saying earlier. You mentioned that people say, "Well, how much time does it take?" Well, it's how much time do you want it to take? It can take. I mean, some people are pretty ubiquitous, and others are, seem to be around pretty seldom. But just having a little nudge from time to time with someone, it's like, hey, and it's nice, I mean, I have that little bit. My kids don't live with me, so I mean, a lot of my communication is like through Facebook chat or Kik, or WhatsApp, and whatever platform they happen to be gravitating to from day to day. But the idea that you can reach out, through the technology and be in touch with people, it's awesome. I mean, and the ability to stay in touch with people too when you move, because I move around a lot, as I mentioned. So it's really handy to just know what the neighbors are doing back home in the States and stuff like that.
Yeah, I saw a report yesterday about Detroit and the water problems they're having there. Plenty of water in Detroit. We laugh when we see places that come talk about water problems, and it's not having to drill a hole in the ground and find more of it. Water on the surface. You're next to the Great Lakes. There's plenty of rivers and lakes and fresh water available. But they have a different kind of problem. They got a city that used to be 3 million people, and now it's 800,000. Same size, same infrastructure. Something's got to pay for it, and they're cracking down on people that don't pay their water bills. And I just heard a couple of weeks ago, electrical, where they were having to shut off people. And before it was, they never shut somebody off. I don't know about never, but for a long time, when they shut off a house for electricity, and turns out that people were taking advantage of that and just not paying for the utilities. I'd hate to be suffering from figuring out whether or not to pay utilities or buy food. And I feel for the individuals, but I fully understand that they got to figure out some way to get the water paid for to keep pumping it someplace. Anyway, in that, houses completely submerged in water because looters come in and take the pipes, break the pipes, and fill the basement with water. And the one they were talking about was a $20,000 water bill, and the person was going to lose their house, but they'd moved out of the house and lived someplace else for months before doing that. In my view of it, if I was having a problem like that, somebody could tell me about it. I could come to visit you, and there'd be people who could tell me whether or not I had water flooding my basement. It never would happen in Las Vegas. They'd find out, they'd shut that water off really quick because it's needed in other places. But and again, where it was available, that's one of the things that I think has killed Detroit, is killing Detroit, why it's a bankrupt community, whatever you want to say, negative about it. It's happened because the people got to a point where there was too few of them to care about each other. And today we've got a way to do that around the world. So
have you ever read a book by, I think it's Chip and Dan Heath, called
Stick? Oh yeah, Heath
or
Brothers.
Switch.
Yeah.
And they talk about the city in North Dakota. You remember that in the book? When they it's the same issue, but a small town, and the tax revenue, the tax base is just declining, and
right.
The young people are all leaving, and everyone's shopping outside the city, et cetera, et cetera. And then they make a decision to just do a couple tiny things that kind of bring back a certain element of civic pride. And it was a real grassroots thing, speaking of roots. And then one of the problems they had, the city was really unsightly because I guess for some reason they'd cut down some trees, but the stumps had been left along this main road. So everyone in the town, or most of the people, able-bodied people, went out and pulled all these things out, and they did it in a day. And it was fascinating because and then they had a small initiative of, hey, spend a little bit more of your discretionary income in town and, try to help your local merchants. And just a couple tiny things they did switched the way people viewed the city and it became their city again, and they grabbed hold of it, and their tax base increased and continues to increase because people got that sense of civic pride. I'm not, I mean, that was a small town and probably a lot less complex than a city like Detroit, but it's interesting to
Right.
me how psychologically, I mean, some of these things are seemingly big problems, but then they can be swept away through some small movement. And actually, in St. Pete, where I grew my business and where I have a house still, downtown St. Pete used to be a place where angels feared to tread.
Mm-hmm.
And they'd come up with all these plans, and they're going to like redesign everything, etc. In the end, it came down to some merchants that were willing to take a chance, opened a shop here and opened a shop there, and then all of a sudden someone built a condo. And now downtown St. Petersburg is, compares very favorably to, say, downtown San Diego. I mean, it's on
Right.
Tampa Bay. It's beautiful. It's got great restaurants, great nightlife. And that's all happened in the last 15 years.
Right. And it was, there's a common thread there. And by the way, I'm using Detroit today, and Detroit's really easy to pick apart and say there's bad things about it. I've been through Detroit once. I've done a lot of studies that give me a lot of, there are a lot of positive things that come from there and did in the past. And I have a lot of respect for the people that decide they're going to, stay there and try something. And it's a perfect. It's actually both of these examples we're talking about are something that we talked about when we did the Billions Rising book. Was there's a lot of people who decide what should be done someplace and externally, especially when somebody externally is pumping money in, like say aid in Africa, that decide what needs to be done. And so I hesitate to give any suggestions to Detroit or any city. I've lived in 3-4 different places where I have seen somebody trying to revitalize a downtown, and I can really take the other side of saying, like, sometimes it ought to die. Like my hometown, there wasn't a downtown. Nobody thought of going to downtown. From the time I was born, we had cars. We shopped someplace else. And the town was in the time they were trying to do this, nearly 100,000, and it had been less than 5 when it last had anything resembling a downtown. And there just wasn't there to save. There were shopping districts. The town was doing okay, all the way to Detroit, where from the outside you think, oh, well, all they need to do is, and you can't do that. And now contrast that with say Kenya, where there's farmers starving on their farm, and you can help them, or you can send bags of food to the starving people, which I can't be against feeding starving people, but the net effect of us sending food for the starving people is that we hurt the farmers that are locally. And so, the smart guy went and said to the farmers, what do you need? Helped them out, and it turned out they weren't just, welfare moms looking for a handout. In fact, I don't think I've ever met a welfare mom looking for a handout that said, I'm just here to scam the government. They all want something. They all want something more, and if you listen to them, there's always something you can do. Was that true in St. Petersburg? Did the movement started with people that wanted to make a difference in St. Petersburg?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's some sort of my point is, I mean, I'm making the same point as you, and that is, you have these people that think they're going to come on, they're going to bring their little idea from on high, and, and
that looks like a drone coming in.
Yeah, they're going to anoint you with their wisdom.
I'm picturing that.
But ultimately, as you said, like with the farmer in Kenya, I mean, the same thing in St. Pete. I mean, the local people have a much better grasp of the situation, and I mean, you can do some landscaping or whatever, but at the end of the day, you got to have people that want to come in, take a risk, pay rent, and I think that anytime you subsidize things like you talked about, like when you bring in food, yeah, I'm not against feeding hungry people either, but then there's the law of unintended consequences. You can send a box of T-shirts to Zambia. You think, wow, I just helped put clothes on a kid's back, and you'd be absolutely right. But you also aren't discussing the fact that there's maybe a seamstress or 50 that you've just put out of business
Right.
because now the clothes they were going to manufacture for those kids is no longer available. So I think most, not always. I mean, sometimes people come from the outside and have an insight just because they're not too close to the problem. But very often the best ideas are kind of homegrown. I mean, they know what they need, but nobody ever asks them.
Well, and let's get all newsy on Africa and say there's the Ebola crisis, which I don't know. How's it reported in Poland? Are you going to die from Ebola next year, according to your local media reports?
I'm actually melting right now, Warren.
No,
it is a little bit sensational. I mean, I think that's kind of an element of the news everywhere now. But people don't seem to. I suppose it's because of the ghastly nature of the way you die from this disease. But I mean, the flu wipes out over 1 million people a year.
Right.
But it's been around forever, so that's.
And it takes the old, young, and weak, and Ebola doesn't. The doctor went to help and he got it. It makes us a good sensational story, and of course, I'm gonna do some research on this. I haven't found out yet, but I'm almost positive that the number of shark attacks are down this year. So we needed something else to talk about.
Yeah. So. Have you seen that? I think it's a slide share where they show the most dangerous animal in the world. You probably know what it is.
The mosquito.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
There's one that most people really tremble when they think of, but it is the most dangerous.
The reason I brought up Ebola is Vice News went to Liberia, where the biggest hit song in Liberia right now is about Ebola, and it's not saying Ebola is going to kill you. The government has outlawed eating bushmeat, and anybody on the street says there's nothing wrong with bushmeat. We eat it every day. And then the cameras point to somebody preparing it, and sure enough, they're cutting themselves while preparing the meat and not running to the emergency room or quarantine. They're wiping off the blood and going back to cutting up the meat for dinner. Once cooked, there's no problem with it. The way they prepare the bushmeat, apparently boiling it, and so the problem is in the preparation and the way they prepare food, but they don't care enough to do anything about it. And so I'm thinking well, that's not going to happen around here. And sure enough, I finally found it. Some smart person yesterday, another YouTube video I found saying well, actually, an outbreak in New York City couldn't happen because we have quarantines in place. We have things we do. We actually can use the equipment that we're using to scare people out of traveling in U.S. airports invading our privacy. With that equipment, all will tell you instantly if somebody has a fever. It's one of the byproducts of living in a state. What do you call that? The state when the state takes over. But anyway, in the scary place we live, where they tell us that TSA's main priority is our safety, and we know that it's all about showing us that they're in control. If you travel outside the U.S., you hear about people and you see things work where they don't have to treat everybody like cattle.
It is actually pretty amazing.
They've got other problems, but it's not shoe bombs. So anyway, but I digress into my somewhat bizarre way of looking at everything, and I think a lot of times we decide we're going to impose what we're going to do to fix something, and we don't cause a problem. In fact, in Liberia, from the report I saw, it appears that they are now thinking Ebola is a big joke. That they've never, conspiracy theory abounds where no, there's no real Ebola. I'm going to go with the facts we're getting from the governments there as being true, that there are people dying. Again, nothing like malaria, but by over sensationalizing stuff, that even doing that causes problems. So, so what is your goal now when you're out and about and doing all this? You wrote a book, you travel. Are you trying to make the world a better place in some way?
You could say that. I mean, I suppose that affecting change. I mean, it depends on. I'm not. I don't have the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation or anything like that. But with regard to, say, for instance, the book. I mean, I actually did a little radio spot this morning, and I was talking about something I like to refer to as manufactured complexity, and how people bring all these goofy rules into their business, and then they wonder why it's floundering, or they get into, like, they're successful at one thing, and then they decide to go into some completely unrelated area that they really don't know anything about, but because they were good at one thing, they presuppose that they're going to be good at all these other things, instead of just taking the one ball they know about and driving it down the field. And that's really probably it's a great thing for me to be an advocate about, because it's a pet peeve that people make. I think not only business, I think people make their life too complicated. They have a lot of rules about how everything's going to be, and then they get really stressed when those rules are violated, and sometimes they create their own stress because they have rules that are in conflict. So they do things that are goofy, and that's sort of the kind of the premise behind my book, and a lot of what I talk about, even in blog posts and stuff like that, is just trying to get people to stay out of their own way.
Wow, that comes into a lot of what I talk about obliquity. Great book by John Kay, Obliquity, and it's how the best path to success, the best path to a goal is often not the direct one, and not to get too much into those old sport metaphors that don't control your life or mine. But boy, if you're trying to get a ball down the field, if you're trying to get to a goal, it's good that they have a nice, clear, defined goal in those games. But if you decide that I'm going to go up the middle to run the ball to the goal, you're not going to last very long on the football field. They're going to know exactly what you're doing. And if you discover through trial and error and A/B split testing that running up the left side is doing better than running up the right side, it doesn't mean that you're going to do that every time and succeed. You got to vary it up. You got to try some other things, and every once in a while you got to run 20 yards back to throw the ball. Is it 20? Whatever. You have to go. The quarterback has to go way back behind the line before he ever tosses the pass, or it's not going to happen. And it's not a straight line between one place and the other. And certainly, just because somebody did it once doesn't mean that they know what they're doing. The path to success: follow what I've done. I've been broke. I've failed in business. Do that, and you'll be. And then the next person is going to say, "Well, all you need to do is fail enough, and you'll succeed," which is ludicrous.
Yeah, no. If you can get it right the first time, why wouldn't you? But it's interesting. The point you make is, and we'll try to gravitate from the sports thing, but there is a certain element of, but once let's say once the guy's running, or in the game context, or even like when somebody's doing something, like an employee, because I actually had a situation just before this call with you that I was signing up for like a fax thing, one of these email fax kind of things, and I was all the way through it, and all I wanted to do was get a number assigned, like that would be my fax number, and then I was ready to go. But I was having a little difficulty with that, so I got on an online chat. To try to make a long story short, basically, I was trying to get a very small piece of information from this person, but either A, they were compensated in a way that they didn't want to give it to me, or B, they were precluded from giving it to me by some rule put in place by management. So in the end, I said, thanks, but I'll see you later. And so instead, I went and got something for free that after searching around a little bit, And so they lost a client off saying there's only one way that, you're going to follow our prescribed method of doing this. And they didn't give this rep a chance to kind of free me. If he'd given me that number, my credit card information was entered into the form. All I had to do is press send. If he'd given me a fax number, they'd have an order that they don't have now. And that's all down to really infrastructure. I mean, I was talking to one of their people, and I had a very small problem that he either could not or would not fix. So it's really fascinating to me and I sent him an email because I thought they should know. It's like, hey, there's a bottleneck in your business. Maybe you want to do something about that.
Right, right. And I'd say that 99.5% of the times I'm complaining anymore this has been true for now decades, is I gave up on trying to make my experience perfect. I know I'm going to find, I think of myself as being the test case. I think back to when credit card machines were sometimes difficult for cashiers to use. And guaranteed, if somebody had a first transaction with the customer, it would be me. And I used to laugh about it when I get somebody that's, I'm not really sure what to do. Well, let me help you on how to use the credit card machine. And if your boss is not available and the rules permit it, whatever it takes, I can help. And that's my place in life, is to be there when somebody's trying to learn something and have enough patience to go along with it. I can't say I always had patience. There were many times when I found something to be just abhorrently stupid, and I just wanted to vent on that. And what I learned was I feel a lot better if I'm helpful Warren instead of the natural Warren, which is, what the heck you mean you need to check my receipt before I can walk out of Costco? That one used to bother me like crazy until the day I decided that my position in life was to try to get a smile out of the person that was checking my receipt. And so I came up with some stupid lines that I use over and over again that I got bored with a whole long time ago, but usually get a laugh out of the person that is putting a mark on my receipt and letting me go. I'm laughing and smiling saying this because it's so much fun. I look forward to that event. Unless there's a long line, and I'm still thinking, what did I sign up for? Being in a good mood when I'm pushing a cart and there's a long line. But most of the time I go to a Costco because I want to be there. I love nothing more than eating demo food and getting $1.35 frozen yogurt. That's my idea of an outing outside of the house when I'm working at home. And I turned it into fun. I think you've seen my quote on Twitter that there's various versions of I don't get to choose what I'm doing in life, but I get to choose whether or not I make it fun, and that's all up to me. That's a personal decision. And if that even goes as far as we put the fun in funeral, which is what I tweeted from my father's funeral. Because it was true. I got to see family. That's why we hold funerals. None of us were glad Dad was gone, but we knew it was coming. We had plenty of warning. We were lucky that way, and so I can't say I would have handled anything like that. But both of my parents, when they passed, it was very much going to come, and that's okay. But I'd like to think the same thing would happen if somebody. I heard somebody say maybe a guy I liked watching in the movies or on TV suddenly took his life. I can't think of any examples where that's ever happened, but
no, not recently.
And I want to give and my reaction now is to say, okay, that's news. I need to know that in case I'm watching a movie and say whatever happened to, and I don't want the wife to say, you idiot, he's gone. So I don't have to look it up in the IMDb as to why he's not making any new movies. And accept the body of work for the great pleasure and wonderful things that it's brought me, and that's okay. Now, it's a joke I couldn't make a week ago, or an observation, let's say, I couldn't make a week ago because it just, it was too raw. People wouldn't say that. Now, hopefully the 12 people that get this far in the program will be able to put up with me saying that. They know my personality. But it comes down to life is going to happen. You could be the most successful person in the world and say, here, do exactly what I did, and something changes. A black swan event happens, and the world's a different place tomorrow. There are no guarantees what's going to happen tomorrow. And so live for today, have a lot of fun, and try while doing that. You know, if things go better when you run to the left, try running to the left. But don't pass a rule that nobody can run to the right, because there may be a man open over there.
Yeah, no, I think that's, very often when people, like, something becomes successful, and then I think, they put a little too much emphasis on, well, we can make it perfect by doing it in this way. I mean, I think there are places for process in many things in life, but I think you can overdo it too, because another example, I was at a hotel in Munich, and there was a problem, and the girl she was so on script. I really had to hold it back, because I have a little bit of a personal disdain for that, and she was, well, we really appreciate your business, Mr. Fargo, and while we're disappointed that we couldn't make your stay better, well, and I was like, can we just skip the extra lines, the paragraph that's coming up, and you can just tell me what you're going to do?
And I'm thinking that probably she needed a hug, and that wasn't your first inclination. It wouldn't be mine. Everything's going to be okay. I don't need to hear the paragraph. Can we just get real for a moment?
Well, it's nice, though, too. I mean, it's a little bit like you're saying about what you do at Costco. I mean, I think one of the things you can do that is helpful in situations like that is try to put people at ease, so that they're like, look, I'm not from a shopping service. I'm not here to try to find fault with you. I'm just trying to solve a problem with my room, and
I'm tired and I want to go to sleep.
if we duck all the formal chatter, we can probably get to the heart of what's wrong, and you can go back to texting your friend, and I can go back to my room. So, no, but it's funny, because you can sometimes, not always. Some people are, they're on script, but very often you can get people that, like, you just give them a little smile, and they kind of see that, you're not there to, poke at them or give them, any undue trouble.
I'm thinking about a time when I was at a hotel, and there are a lot of fires in Southern California, and there's one pass to drive through to go home to Las Vegas. It happened to be that where these fires were, and right at that point is where I spent most of my life. And so I knew the area very well, and I tried to drive around it and tried a couple of things, and I wasn't the only person that thought of that, and it was a mess. So now I find myself at 10 o'clock at night trying to get a hotel room. And I also wasn't the first one to decide not to go over the pass that night, not to sit on the freeway waiting for it. And I get in, and they tell me there's no rooms, and I'm friendly. And next thing I know, there's a bunch of people that have. What's happened is, it's a few years ago, the online reservation system was allowing people to register, and then they show up, and there were no rooms. And so there had been people turned away. I was, at that point, the first one in the line because everybody else had left. I stood there and helped the guy because I thought that I had an inkling that he had a room, the handicap room they kept for spare. And, and I helped him for 15 minutes, defer people away, got a couple of people to smile, helped him defuse a situation. At the end of that, I got an upgrade. I got the room that nobody else got, and I got treated right because I took the time to stand there and help him. I look at my body of work in doing that. The chances of me being in a good mood checking into a hotel are, really low, but I did have that one time that it worked. And, I didn't get a luxury suite. I didn't get free breakfast. I just got, a fair price on a room I needed for 10 hours to sleep and then get back on the road when the fire was cleared. And the gratitude of knowing that the system worked. I was out a night's sleep and and $150 as I recall. But a lot of other people were still out there driving around trying to figure out where they were going to get a room. So I, got to be grateful for what I did get. I managed to get home for the next appointment, which was interviewing somebody famous. And I actually drove to a casino, changed my shirt in the parking lot. Why I needed to change my shirt is a part of the story I can't remember because I did have a hotel room. But remember changing my shirt in a parking lot and brushing my teeth there, and then going into the hotel and to a meeting where I got to meet a famous guy that I thought I was going to miss entirely because of all the problems. None of that would have happened if I hadn't bothered to be nice to the guy. I could have went a whole different direction, and certainly wasn't my intention after 8 hours of trying to get through that pass. So I guess we all have that in us, and we don't know where it's going to lead to. Isn't that kind of summing it up? And one tweet led to us having this conversation.
Yeah, no, and I think, as you said, it's if you have the presence of mind to realize that, the other person, and I'm not saying I always do this, but that the other person is generally not trying to obstruct you in some way, but maybe they've had, a lousy day, maybe they got something they don't like going on in their life or whatever, and if you can get them to kind of relax and help them out, even so much as just like to get them to kind of almost like break their pattern or whatever, because sometimes people are in that, like they're in that angry place, but you kind of bring them back to just do something a little absurd. And I've had situations like that I think are funny, and just where you bring something back to earth, and then the next thing you know, you're getting an upgrade. But I think what we're really talking about in many cases is just being human with the other person. And it's actually, going back to how we met, and something that gets talked about a lot. I don't know how much it gets practiced, but when people are real and they're human on social media, and they're not, you can kind of get their personality. It's not just cloaked over in a lot of formal language. So much more happens, and I know, you're definitely an advocate of that. It's interesting how a lot of businesses seem to still be afraid that if they let their social media people be themselves, that something really untoward is going to happen.
I know when somebody lets the social media people be like that, there's a good chance that's how they're going to be when I do business with them. And when they, when all the tweets come in, I've tried this of late. Somebody says, we look forward to reading your tweets. When I meet them on Twitter, I'm thinking like, who's we? What is it? We hope you'll visit our Facebook page. And I say, who is this? Is there a human, or do you get a committee together to work on writing a tweet? I actually had one last week tell me that everybody works on every tweet. Like, that ought to be fun. You get together as a committee, and what, you take turns typing words? How do you do this? And they finally admitted that wasn't the case. But I was just having some fun, because otherwise I used to say, you idiot, you said we instead of I on Twitter. That's not as good. Well, that would be me imposing a rule. And as a matter of fact, the first two words in our Twitter book were no rules. I don't care if somebody wants to say we and all their stuff, if they want to communicate as a brand. And early on, I think the first time I went to a Twitter conference in Mountain View, early 2009, and everybody there. It was at the the computer museum, and it was a couple of blocks away from Google, and very close to Facebook. Twitter was up the road a bit. So we're talking about people who knew the technology for sure, the early adopters, and that's why I'm an early adopter. Is my tech influence. I'm just watching what these people do, and the ones I really like are the business and marketing oriented guys who I've been following forever, and that's it. Guy Kawasaki, Jeff Pulver was on Twitter and Facebook when I started, and got to know those people, which they were like heroes who I'd never met or had any reason to meet, but I knew who they were. And so here I am. I'm getting a chance to speak. They're telling me that talking about the way Zappos does business is old hat. Everybody knows that example. And I just laughed. I'm going like, well, if they know it, why aren't they all doing it? So that was one thing. That Intel had a person on the panel, and the person at the last minute couldn't make it, and they sent somebody that didn't know what they were talking about. Nothing bad against Intel. In fact, the kid they sent was smart. That wasn't the problem. He just wasn't the person they wanted. And so really surrealistic thing, because back in early 2009, you could see that sea of people all with their laptops open and cell phones out and tweeting while we talked, and they were taking tweets as for questions from the audience, and nobody was looking at us, which if you look like me, that's exactly what you want to have happen on stage. And somebody started talking about being authentic and being real, and I just kind of like blurted out. I said, well, we're not going to have Betty Crocker or Mickey Mouse show up and talk as if they're the company, as they're we. It's a personality. There's exceptions to the idea that everybody has to be a real human that you deal with. If Mickey's Twitter account starts talking as Mickey in first person, I'm going like, I get it, but I'm not expecting to find out who's in the costume. And I don't think that Betty Crocker would fly today, to make up a personality to sell cake mixes or whatever they started with Betty Crocker. Interesting to note that just yesterday I had to explain to a couple of successful business people why you add an egg to a cake mix, which is something in marketing and business I thought everybody knew. They added that because people wanted to be involved in the progress. Talk about engagement. Those are very smart people back then. But they made up a Betty Crocker character, and we were supposed to think that there was this cartoon drawing of a woman that was a real person. They never said she was real, but you had that feeling. Today, I don't know if that's a good way to go. You could come up with a character. And so that whole experience left me saying, like, we don't know. And I was right to write no rules. There isn't a right number of Twitter friends to have or a right number of times to tweet a day. And early on, lots of people say you couldn't possibly have more than 50 Twitter friends. Those are the same people that didn't use text with more than a handful of people. There were rules. I can count. My father always taught me you can count your good friends on the fingers of one hand. Okay, that's good. Dunbar said 150. Yeah, well, Dunbar didn't have Twitter. So.
Yeah. So I really like that. To me, because I think the concept in anything is no rules. In the end, and that's what I think is actually kind of funny about Twitter is how you have people that seem to want it to be used in a certain kind of way, but it's evolving, and it'll be it's like a piece of land. It could have been agricultural, but then maybe it gets converted and it becomes partly residential and partly like a park. The way that piece of land gets used is going to be dictated by the people on that piece of land. In this case, kind of the landscape, if you will, of Twitter. And it's not one person's decision. I think there are trends, and it depends, of course, on what your goal is. Some people's goal is just to be there and hang out and talk to people, and some people seem to have some very interesting goals on Twitter. But
and there are people who are just trying to figure out whether or not somebody's going to buy something, and they don't want to have a conversation. And I say more power to them. I do the dumb auto DM of the day, which is not every day and never was intended to be. But I post a DADM hashtag, and what it is I lift exactly what somebody has sent me as an auto DM. And the idea was back when they started to become popular and the services started offering them, people kept trying to experiment and tell me. As late as last year, I had somebody eloquently over a series of days and many tweets tell me that there were times when auto DMs welcoming people were a good idea, and not everybody felt like I did. It turned out the guy was 20 years old, living in China or India. Well, one of the two. It would seem like it stood out. It probably was China. India I talk to all the time. China in English, not quite so often. But and to me, the kid was trying to make this point, and one of the things I remember is that I wanted to pay attention and find out what he had to add of value. So then I asked my followers if anybody ever successfully used an auto DM or liked it or knew of any story of it working, and it was pretty much a solid voice of this one thing I know that I can get everybody to agree with me on. There are a lot of other things that people will give me trouble on, but not that one.
I have the same phobia, and it's interesting because when people follow me, I follow back. Most of them, anyhow, and so I get a fair number of them. And I mean, I've noticed you do it, and occasionally I've pointed it out to people because I have the same feeling. It's sort of, if anything, to me, it's almost like anti-marketing. I mean, by doing that, it's sort of saying, I mean, if you're really interested, then say something. And
right. Well, I think you were paying attention to me when we first met because you had a book. I think it's concurrent to when your book was coming out. I don't really know. I assumed that at the time, and that's okay. I can see through that if it's something to see through. No, I mean, it's genuine from you all the time, but people do that to me. They approach me. They know I've got a reputation for making books into bestsellers. Back in the past when it took some effort. Today it's, get a good category on Amazon and sell the book and you're going to be a bestseller. And if anyone's not making some, some attention for their book, they're just doing it wrong. But I would say 9 out of 10 requests I get for a new band, especially hip-hop. For some reason, they think I'm really into hip-hop. For the record, I'm not. And we were just about to drop our new single. They love to say that. If it says drop a new single, I'm guaranteed I'm not going to like the music. I don't know whether or not it's because I'm too old to say drop a single or what the cause is there. But they say, even if they're following me and I'm following them, which would be some kind of a relationship, 9 out of 10 times, the first tweet I ever get from them is, will you please retweet this? And that's not appropriate as a first thing to say. You don't walk up to somebody you just met, you exchange business cards, and says, can I count on you for some business? Can I count on, or I have experienced this, that somebody, you meet them, and they say, happy to meet you. I'd like to give you 3 business cards because I know you have at least 2 friends who could use my service. And guaranteed what I'm going to do when I get those 3 business cards. No, wrong answer if you're thinking I'm going to throw away 2 of them. I'm going to throw away all 3 of them. I don't want to know that person because they haven't got enough etiquette to come to me and think in terms of how can we establish a relationship between saying hello and actually getting down to business. So you don't go to a bar and ask every woman to go home with you. I understand that, the later in the night and the more that, the longer people have stayed somewhere around closing time, that does work, but I don't want to do it that way. That's not my style. It's going to be, hello,
Well,
hi, can we go to dinner? Can we have coffee? Can I call you next week? Going to work better, and I like using what works.
well, and I think that's always the case. And I actually cringe a little bit when I think back to my early days on Twitter because I was kind of ramming into things like a small child with a helmet. But if you're paying attention, I mean, I can understand people doing that. And then, if you give them a little pushback, like most people will kind of catch themselves. And if they
Yeah.
really have some character, they'll come back. Because you actually kind of gave me a little slap. Not hard, but you kind of said,
Yeah.
dude,
I can
you're
remember.
like,
I can't remember
I love
exactly.
you, but I don't love you that much.
Yeah, I remember that happening with you. That's right. But you came right back, and I've forgotten exactly what it was. Where you might remember, because I do that all the time, and it's almost like a attack. And quite often I get people, who the heck are you? I'm a social media expert. I know what I'm doing. Don't tell me how to use Twitter. And I'm going like, sorry, I was just telling you. No, I just wanted to let you know that when you send me a list of 3 names followed by "you're very special" and then sent with justunfollowme.com, I'm thinking there's probably a pretty good chance that you didn't sit down and think, I would like to write to Warren and get to know him.
And I know he's probably not familiar with Just Unfollow.
Yeah, he won't get that I'm using a service to send this to him and 2 names that he doesn't recognize. But, and I'm joking about it here, but the truth is when I get one of those, I'm thinking like, if my kid or a client or, somebody I want to get to know does that, how can I respond in such a way that leaves the door open so that the person like Tim responds with, oh, well, of course, I'll be nice to you. And my bad if I don't check out who it is enough, because if I was able to look up instantly, and sometimes it's a little hard to do, how many mutual friends, or have we ever talked before, or what's some other indicators that are a little bit tougher to get, how many followers you have, what your tweets are that you've sent to other people, and the fact that you send me one auto DM doesn't mean I'm going to discount you. And that was obvious in getting to know you, but in getting to know, somebody who's got 27 of those when I go to their page, and I can't find anything else, and they've got 12 followers, I have to assume that that's somebody that's just barely signed up. They don't know any better, so I can't be mad at them. Like you say, bumping into things, kid with a helmet, I like that. When my kids were learning to walk, I didn't go to them and scold them every time they fell down. That's not very encouraging. But you have to be aware that they're falling down.
That's a great point.
Yeah, I couldn't make falling down not hurt, and it's not my job to make it not hurt. And so, way to go! Thanks for sending me the auto DM. That was really cool, because pretty soon they think that that's okay. Boy, we talk about problems in society and unintended consequences. That was what would come if we didn't, kind of let people know that we're out to eat our young on Twitter. No, seriously, I'm not. I don't want. It hurts the idea that somebody gets mad at me. The latest was something. It wasn't Ebola. It was some places always has a conflict that I don't bring up for purposes of being that I'm not on either side of that conflict, and I don't want to give both sides the idea that I'm on the other side. But it was another Ebola type thing where somebody was getting very worked up about a current issue, and I wasn't going along with them. And just like I'm not going to say, well, I'm not anti-Robin Williams, but I'm a big fan, but I'm not going to post his name. Oh, there, I've used it. We're definitely the part of the program where everybody is tuned out. Bye, it was nice seeing you. So we can talk now. Yeah, just us. We're going to talk. Listeners, go away. No, that we post, but I'm not going to come out and post writing things about what a tragedy it was to lose Robin is just, is you dealing with your problems, and I'm not gonna write that. Hey, because my initial reaction personally, this is my first time publicly saying it, told a few friends, is that when I first heard that news was coward, mad, because I'd like to see some more output, and that lasted for a second, and I went back and I troubled guy. I'm sorry somebody didn't reach out, and then who to blame was the next thing, because when I decided it wasn't his fault, who to blame. Then it quickly got to the I have personal experience with people showing, and I've seen the stats where somebody commits suicide because some other person has, and so it's something I don't want to talk to about. So several days it went on this last week. It was one person got their gang. There's some gang of people who now have figured out how to use Twitter right. And they're all together, and they're all very self-important, and collectively they don't have 1,000 followers. But they decided to explain to me how important it was, and I said, I will not retweet your suicide hotline or whatever you're trying to talk about. What it was doesn't even matter. I will not. I just an issue I choose not to talk about in public, and then in tweets, because I'm not going to get on the phone and take these people on or hold a hangout, because again, it's not my brand, it's not what I do. And their reaction quite often is, well, you have to. You have all those followers. You have a duty to society, and I don't. I'm a nice guy who try to help society because I want to, not because I have a duty. The FCC didn't tell me that I have to run PSAs. Public service announcement for you kids.
Kind of a similar, I suppose, thing. I had I get this fairly often. Somebody will object to a quote.
Oh yeah.
And I usually just let it go. But somebody really kind of let me have it. And I just wrote back and said, it's a tweet, not a dissertation. So, no, but they
That's actually a very polite slap.
But in a fairly concise way. But they were objecting to the fact that this quote was a generalization, and I thought, by its very nature, a tweetable quote is going to be a generalization. I mean, it's not going to be I'm sorry that I can't fit in 140 characters a sort of treatise for you to live. My most sincere apologies. We're still working on that one in the Twitter lab.
I'm going to try. I love the idea. I love that I have been constrained to 140 characters. This conversation is a lot like most of my conversations, other than it's shorter than a lot of them. And I love the idea that I'm confined to 140 characters, and I try really hard not to write 2 tweets to somebody. Now, there'll be a multi-threaded conversation, like, say, with you, where we're talking about you coming on the show. You've retweeted me. I've retweeted you. There could be this hairy especially if somebody else gets involved. And I love it when your followers get involved, because I know, like, oh, good, he's got a following that's not mine, and we're talking about this. That can't hurt me. Of course, if it's you, one of your followers, and me, I know who the jerk is. That's my job at that point. Don't have to try. I just know that that's one of the features. I'm the guy that's going to come off like a jerk. And the one that really bothers me is when I say, love is the answer, it's always the answer, and somebody comes back and says, not in business. And I'm going, that's it. That's the thing I'm trying to get across, is it is the answer in business. It is people to people. I had a conversation with, it was Brian Solis, who is, big name at talking about the effects of social media and business and what to do and how to do it right, and love everything that he does. Don't totally agree with everything, but love the general direction. And we're friends. And so he was promoting his book once and was in Vegas and decided to hold a party. And I showed up just as another guy who likes Brian Solis and showed up. And I think it was if it wasn't the first time we met, we talked on the phone because I think he had contacted me back when I was a book marketing expert and he had his first book. But so you know, I knew him, but I don't think we'd ever met in person. And I go down to this club where he's holding a party, and I don't drink, and going to a club in Las Vegas is not a big event for me. You know, it's 5 minutes from my house. And so I went to show up and had a couple conversations going on, and he comes up, is very glad to see me. I'd forgotten how much history we had. And we had a great conversation, and he gave me the best of compliments ever, telling me that one of the things we were talking about I should write up in a post, and he had a place where he could put it. And, you know, and one of my disappointments in life is that I didn't take advantage of that. But in a conversation, you know, I said, well, there's a difference between me and you. I say listen and love. That's the answer to marketing. It's the answer to life. The 2 words, listen and love. Treat somebody as if they're a friend. And if you do those 2 things, everything else is going to work out. Most of us don't listen. And then when we do, we're looking for the hook of where we can sell something to somebody. We turn that around to how can I help you? If that person at the hotel that you were talking about had been thinking, what can I do to make this guy's day? She was listening to you, but she was very much trying to read her paragraph back to you. And I want to give her a hug. It's probably not native English. She's probably trying really hard to take care of the big dumb American. And you know, when you go there again, find her and give her a hug and say it's from me.
Okay.
But you know, and I told him, and I said it wouldn't work. And I tell that whole story is it was kind of a regret. When I think back of it, I should have said, you know, Brian, it really is listen and love. I understand how you don't write that in what you're doing. And you write with a lot longer, more syllables in your words than I do. But the truth is, it's as simple as that. If you treat everybody as if they're somebody who could be a relative or a friend or somebody that you truly care about, why not? We're related to everybody. We're connected to everybody. Treat everybody like that, and it's going to work out. And so, guaranteed, if I post that right now on Twitter, somebody today will come back and tell me, well, it doesn't work in business. It's a dog-eat-dog world. Okay. No, it's not. Business is not a sports metaphor. We're not in business. We're not online to get traffic and eyeballs and visits and conversions. All that stuff's important. I use those terms every day. But boy, when I'm philosophically trying to think of where the goal is, it is not traffic. it's a chance to love more people.
Well, I think ultimately, you know, what you're saying, if you really try to solve someone's problem, let's say you want to be a hardcore business person. You know, you don't want to hear this fluffy love nonsense that Warren's spouting. But, you know, the reality is some of the best things you could ever do is if you don't have the product that's going to serve their need or service, then put them to the person who will, because it'll come back to you. You might not think so. You know, don't try to fit them into, you know, your square peg into the round hole they're trying to fill. Just steer them over to the other person. Let them go over there. And, you know, but it's still the same thing. It's still the same thing that you're talking about. If you're just willing to be a human about it and go, you know what, I'm not, you know, I don't want to just try to like push this guy down a path, and usually it won't work anyhow. All you do is just develop a lack of credibility with an educated buyer. But if you say, hey, look, you know, I've got a competitor that does that, and they're pretty good, so let me give you their number. People remember things like that. And not to mention, when I was running the investigative firm, we had a few friendly competitors, because there were times, because it's a service business, cases are coming in, and people have a rush job. But I've got all my guys, I mean, they're ready to go for the next day, you know, and I just don't have the personnel. So, you know, when you like share information with other people, I mean, you don't have to give them all your deep, dark secrets, but, you know, when you're willing to help each other out like that, I mean, it's better for business, and you know what? It makes getting up every morning a lot more fun.
And that's what it's all about. I don't always get to choose what I'm doing, but I get to choose whether or not I'm making it fun. And so why not make it fun? And, you know, when it took me an awful long time, and it, boy, still comes up all the time, daily at least, sometimes many times in the day is, you know, I could have some more money if but, you know, I'm doing what I want. I'm serving who I want to serve. I have a goal of making more money than I make now. Of course, who doesn't? But it's like, and I've been through losing everything enough times that, you know, through the ups and downs of living as an entrepreneur, that I like this life. I'm not, you know, I'm not regretting. And, you know, I had a major, you may have heard that there was a banking crisis in 2008. You know,
where?
Yeah, so I can't say I lost more than anybody, but I certainly went down fast as well as anybody. And all during that, there was never a time when I was worried about whether or not I could buy myself a meal or have a place to stay at night or anything that's really important compared to most of the world's population. And in my very worst month, I don't think you know, when you don't count asset losses, you count cash income, I would be considered rich by almost any standard, even as my bank account dwindled to zero and having debt. You know, that and after gone through that, boy, I don't want to do that again. At the same time, I don't regret having been through it. And I know that anything that happens is going to be for the positive. If I have to wait in line and get my receipt checked at the Costco, you know, that's going to happen. I mean, I'm not going to eliminate that from my life. I eliminate any line I can. That's the one thing that really gets me is if I'm waiting, you know. So it could be that I'm down to the last minute setting up the Google Hangout to talk to you, and then when it comes to that I get on and I don't see you there, it takes me about 2 seconds where I'm going like, well, I wonder if that jerk's going to show up. And, I'm not talking about today because I don't think it could have went better than today. But, you know, as a matter of fact, there, you know, even in today, my system had rebooted in the last, you know, 12 minutes before I walked into the room. And I ended up staying up very, very late. In fact, I didn't go to bed until 7 in the morning, and it was 10 here when we started. You know, and so there was a lot of thoughts about whether or not to bother doing it. Hey, Tim will understand. I'll just cancel. I don't have an appointment after that for a while. Let me just do that. I'm going, what a cherished, wonderful life that I lived that I'm in that situation, and how blessed am I that I have learned sometime along the line that I didn't want to at the moment, but I came, set it up. We have this conversation, and now I'm cherishing it as like the best thing I've done in a long time. And isn't that the way you want to live life?
Yeah, no, I mean, well, it is. As you said, I mean, you know, I've had my fair share of ups and downs, but I mean, if you compare it to what a lot of people have to deal with, you know, it was a hiccup. I got through it. A lot of I kind of put myself through.
Yeah.
Probably my worst was when I was giving blood to get food. But you know, to be honest, I mean, it wasn't really probably a necessity. I could have called my parents, but I just pride. I was too proud.
Right. Well, you were causing your own problem. There's so much of the world's problems are people wanting to make a problem and overcomplicate and, you know, make trouble where there's no trouble. And if you just take the simple idea of I'm going to get anything I want out of life by helping other people get what they want, Zig Ziglar, and that's fine. It doesn't matter whether you're a door-to-door pots and pan salesman like he was, or, you know, you're making a huge deal or whatever. It's not about can I screw the other guy. And, you know, if we took a 20th century approach to business, let's say sports, we would put, you know, if there's 5 men on the court for basketball, I'm displaying my great sports knowledge. I know that they play with 5 players on the court. And I say, well, I'm going to use my money and power to get the rules changed so that I can hire 3 extra guys out there and the other team can't. And we're going to drill that ball in, and we're going to install a ladder and make that part of the rules, that we just have one guy at the top of the ladder and he dunks the ball in. You know, we could. The rules, you know, the rules we have in sports are not that sacrosanct. I've seen things change. when I played basketball, there was no three-point line, and you know, things change over time, and if you take that to the point of ridiculous and say, let me use my money, fame, and power to get this done, people say, that's no fun. Um, so I like that there are some constraints. Constraints give us a different way to be creative. I don't think if you just say, I'm going to go out in the field and flail my arms, and that will be creative, and I hope everything goes right. And then you go watch the dancer do that, and they do just that, but in the right context, and that they get paid a lot of money to do what I think is just crazy. You know, you have to figure out there's some rules. You follow those rules, and you break those rules as often as possible. And at the end of the day, it doesn't matter, because, you know, no matter who wins this Monopoly game, tomorrow I'm going to play again. I really like Monopoly.
Well, you know, one of the things you mentioned, you know, was talking about, like, you know, the different rules and how people are, you know, like displaying creativity without kind of a backdrop. And I guess I'd almost call it like a friction point. You know, when you've had, like, to me, like a lot of the best things, I mean, the best ideas, the best creative ideas, they come out of adversity. You know, when people either, you know, they need to get something done, or, you know, or an inefficiency. But I mean, like the best art, you know,
the real
sunshine
creative and smart people are crazy.
I'm sorry?
There's one right there. Smart. There's a lot of smart people that are very gifted people that are crazy or have their problems. I say crazy because I think we can call everybody crazy. I'm crazy. You're crazy, and you know the fantastic comedian is crazy, and the smartest guy I know personally, if he was here with us, I'd say right to his face, he's crazy. You know, and I don't think you have to be crazy to be highly creative and smart, but boy, there sure is a correlation. And
no, there's no question.
Yeah. It's the balancing act that keeps us alive is that we're not perfect at everything. I don't think biologically you can make a perfect working model that's everything in balance. And one thing I discovered personally, I don't want to be the guy who tries to get the center of everything and stays in balance. So I like being the weirdo I am, and I'm not going to change that. I've just changed the fulcrum point a few times. And if I can, I'll cheat and change the equation, because I think that life is the Kobayashi Maru. We are being tested here, but the best way to win is to cheat. Wow, we've gone everywhere. We've plenty of sports references and even a Star Trek reference for you fans. Try to put that in every call. Well, great. Yeah. We've got something here that if somebody is indoors watching all of this, they might pick up a few gems. And with some proper editing, we have a really good radio interview. So all that's left is for us to we've got to see the cover of your book and know what we've got to do if we want to find you, because I want more, Tim. Alpha success is keeping it simple.
Write it down.
Yeah.
This is the key to life.
And at first I thought that you were just successful that at this age you'd finally got around to learning the entire alphabet. But of course, with your travels, you probably know a few alphabets. So but that's not what the book's about. Give us a pitch and pretend that you want to sell copies of the book for a moment.
Okay. Essentially, what I did, I had an idea a long time ago, after reading a disappointing business book, that I felt like a lot of books approach business, they were a little too dry. And so I hit on the idea of taking the alphabet and dividing it into acronyms. In my book, it's 9 acronyms. And each acronym ends up being a chapter of the book, a pretty basic lesson about business, and I really would say even about life, about commitment, about being grateful and saying thank you, things like, you know, being inspired does make a difference, and just getting to the point, like what I brought up earlier, like this manufactured complexity. I think if people take the time to do something as simple as saying thank you, and a lot of people probably say, what difference could that possibly make? It can make a huge difference. I mean, in the last 10 years, I've bought 5 cars. One salesperson sent me a thank you card. One. Now, that's not buying Post-it notes at Office Depot or Staples. That's a significant purchase for most people. And, to not acknowledge it and say, hey, why don't you come back? For me, it was just like crazy. But I encountered things like that all the time in business and I don't think it's not because I don't think people are like sort of, the world's not malevolently configured. It's not negatively configured. Let's put it that way, since I can't pronounce the other word. And I think the problem is that people just forget. They get busy and they take their eye off, in my opinion at least, what's most important. What's your real goal when you're selling a car? I mean, what you're really doing is you're providing transportation to someone and trying to make, like you talked about, you're trying to make them happy. And the same thing, like one of my chapters, I mean, whether it's saying thanks or another chapter is MNO, which is make notes and observations, because our memories are not as good as we like to think they are. And if you write down some of the things that your client needs and wants and things like that, that's a really, or even your wife or your, husband or whatever, your, friend. By knowing things like that and making a note of it, you have an opportunity to do something extra for them, or to know anticipate a need they might have in the future. Where if you just said, oh, I'll remember it. I mean, if I had a nickel for all the little things I've forgotten in life, my net worth would be a lot higher. But I do. I think that each chapter is a little nugget to help people get what they want out of life, and that's really my goal in writing the book, is because each one it's an acronym to make it memorable. It's a story. They're story based to make it memorable, and I just want people to, like, if they buy the book, and all the proceeds go to Save the Children anyhow. So I'm not making anything out of it. And I think it's just a chance for people to get some decent business lessons and or life lessons, and get more of what they want. Because I think, like I say, I mean, a lot of what holds people back, I think they know what to do, but it's the same reason why even professional teams have coaches, and professional people have coaches, because it's easy to get caught up in the kind of shuffle of what you're doing and forget, what the core of what you need to do is.
Yeah, it's interesting, and at no time do you use the word the ultimate guide to success and how to have a perfect life and guaranteed right way to do anything. Everything you said was suggestions and lessons and help and coaching. These are all good things. We can help. And by the way, that's all love. Because you can't measure it. You can't say if you change your headline to red, you'll have a 3.4% uptick in the amount of sales without doing any work. And we'd love to find those easy buttons, and there are some out there in a situation. But again, if you're the quarterback and you read that changing the headline to red could work, and you give it a try, it'd be okay. But you better be smart enough to know that when the page is painted red, adding a red headline isn't going to help. You've got the wrong color. You're playing the wrong game. You get your head in the game. You figure out how to do it. And boy, this is the most sports metaphors I've ever used in an hour.
Well, something that's interesting about that too, though, is people will latch on to an idea like that, and depending on how competitive their industry is, something's only an advantage for a limited time. Screaming, like if you have a store, you put a speaker outside it, let's say. Right. That's your idea to get traffic. Well, that might work. I don't know. I've never been a retailer.
Right.
But it could work. But if the guy next to you, then he's going to put a speaker out. Well, before you know it, the street is filled with the sort of, blaring noise and competing volume of all these people. And I think, that therein lies part of the problem of any kind of formula that you try to impart to people and say, this is the way, is that once everyone starts doing it, especially things that are formula, like a formula-based idea where just change this one thing, those kind of evaporate. And I think having the sort of insight to do exactly what you said, if you care about the customer and if that's your goal, a great example for me is Pepsi. And I have had plenty of that and Coca-Cola, so I'm not really particularly biased. But actually, either brand. I mean, what is Pepsi? This is like one of my favorite things. Like, people go, "Oh, I've got a great brand name." Look, if you put enough marketing behind the most goofy name in the world, people will think, "Oh, that's the most marvelous." If you just, I don't know if you can like extract your like past from it, but to me, on the surface, just Pepsi, it's kind of a weird word, but you've heard it so many times that it's part of our vocabulary.
Right.
And
it goes back to the mass century when you were able to having enough money to change the rules and put extra players on the field or do something like that. You were able to beat out the competitors. And there's no doubt about it. We went through a period of time when the mom and pop store was hurt by the big box and the shopping malls and things like that. But I'm trying to remember. Oh, you were talking about acronyms, and something came back to me I haven't heard in a long time, and I've really been reflecting on my college mentor and the things so many things he taught me that I just recently ran into a friend I hadn't seen for 32 years. His name is Brian Johnson. I have another good friend named Brian Johnson now, and you probably know people named Brian Johnson. So, and he claimed to have forgotten my name, and I said, dude, I've got to put this on you. You're my college roommate. You're the one that's got to remember my name. Remembering your name doesn't help with Google. and he's not a guy you can Google his name or the spelling of his name or even where he works or what he does and find anything about him online. He's always been an advertising guy helping other people. So anyway, it turned out, thank you, Google and Facebook, and I figured out which Brian Johnson he was while talking to my other friend, telling him that he was one of my two favorite Brian Johnsons, and feeling that needed an explanation. So, I just want to tell somebody that there's another guy with your name I like better without some kind of explanation. And so, and that led me that day, and I thanked the other Brian Johnson profusely because that got me thinking about it. Every time I saw his name, I thought about this friend who I can't find online. Tried a couple more things, found a picture of a baby, which apparently is his grandkid, and we reconnected. Once he got my invite on Facebook, he happened to be online, accepted it. We were on the phone within 5 minutes and talked for 90 minutes. And it was like, it was like talking to my best friend from college that I hadn't missed the 32 years. And so we got talking about, I'm way off the subject I started on, but I'll get back to it. Clyde Johnson, no relation, who is my college mentor. And the funny thing is, within minutes, that's what we were talking about. And we said, boy, we ought to figure out a way to go and honor this guy and write a book about it. We were lucky enough to be in the few years that he was teaching at the university that, we happened to be there, happened to pick the right course, that this mentor was there, happened to be the guy that opened up all the Kmarts for the West Coast. And he told us about the acronym, which you may have seen. I don't know, I don't think they've done this for an awful long time, but as you'd go through the check stand at Kmart, the initials TYFS AK, which those six letters were plastered on every cash register. The customer could see them, but they didn't know necessarily what they meant, and it's what they said to every customer. In fact, you could get fired.
Thank you for shopping at Kmart.
You got it. You could get fired for not saying thank you. Here's what I know that not everybody knows. the statistics were overwhelmingly in support of them doing that. Even as plastic and dumb and corporate direction and all the things that we've been talking about wrong, that sticker resulted in an increase of sales when they did it. All they did was say thank you. And the average customer, not studying Kmart or having the mentor or the kind of person that wonders why there's an acronym on the cash register, all the normals went through, heard thank you for shopping at Kmart, and thought that the cashier was friendly. It reminded the cashier to look the person in the eye and have a personal moment with them. Increased sales, must be that at some point that became too plastic and didn't work and was, I think, eliminated. I can't remember. I'm going to have to go to Kmart and check that out if I'm going to write a book on it. Whether or not they still use it, and dig up something that'll tell me what the stats are on it. But those simple things work. I know that when I thank the people at the Costco, at the check, it's now at the check stand, anybody helping at the check stand, any other person I run into, and the person who audits my receipt, I say thank you to all of them. And I want to see them smile. And I walk out of a Costco feeling really good. Well, I've just had a frozen yogurt. But I feel really good as I'm going out to go back to my day or whatever I'm doing. It's become an experience I thoroughly enjoy because I'm the person saying thank you. I took the lead and did that. Boy, we could get into stories of places where I've seen good customer service be told to people not to do that. Servers in chain restaurants and, don't do that. That's not our policy. Or models who don't smile. I think that goes back to photographs. There's the little bit of research I did said that in early photography, smile you can't hold for all the time you had to expose a photo or paint a portrait, even back before that. And so apparently, and then there's a certain allure to the sexy model who doesn't smile, and you're not really sure, could I get her to like me? It sells whatever it is. Is this person aloof and exclusive? But I'm smiling. I'm going to keep on smiling because smile is infection. Thank you works, and there's something to these acronyms. So we'll have to talk again about your acronyms. In the meantime, everybody should buy Alphabet Success.
Alphabet Success.
And follow Alphabet Success on Twitter, as I do. And, you want to see some interesting discussions, look up Warren Whitlock, all one word, and Alphabet Success. Do a Twitter search, and you will see people who talk to each other every day who just met for the first time today. So thank you all for being here. Thank you, Tim. Been a pleasure. And that's it.
Thank you, Warren. I really appreciate you having me on.